Evening, guys. Welcome to Pawpaw Storytime. I think it's about normal time. It's probably about 5 or so. Let me see. Always feel underprepared. I know I ain't, though. So, we got some good stories today. Grandma Lovey did give me a book. It's a Captain America, and it's a golden book. That's going to go in our list. I don't know. I might save it for the 4th of July. It is Captain America, but we're going to stick that over here. We'll go put him in and get our stuff sorted out for next year. And we're reading our Curious George book today. Oh, I feel a little tired. I probably look a little tired. And I don't know why. I really didn't do anything today. I did work yesterday, though. I am kind of excited. I did spend part of my morning drinking my coffee and looking at stays for Christmas. Because I think we're going to do a bunch of experience things again for most of everything like we did last year. Anyways, I guess we'll just go ahead and jump right in here. We're still doing the drawing. I need to keep saving that. We're still doing the drawing that started with the Kindness Magic Mug with the stir from the artist, I can't remember her name, at the Overland Park Art Fair. We have the Bluey hat. We still have the Daniel Tiger. He's watching over us, but only for a couple more weeks. We only got a couple more weeks, and then we'll be doing the drawing. We haven't had that many entries in the last few weeks. I've had a lot of people click on the video, but not a lot of people reacting or commenting. So the way to earn the entries will be in the comments again, and that's it. Let's get started. This week we're still reading through the Giving Box book again. So we are actually on page 54. The Giving Box is to create a tradition of giving with your children, and these are stories for the kids in the back. This one's called How the Chipmunk Got Its Stripes. Oh, and I got my Bluey pen on, and we got Swifty button up here. Okay. How the Chipmunk Got Its Stripes. Let me turn this a little bit here. American Indian legends are sacred stories. They tell us the love of the earth, the interdependence of all living things, and respect for nature. Here is a story with all three messages. All through the winter, the bear did what all bears do in the winter. He slept. He had a long, long sleep in the cold, cold winter. When spring came, the sun began to shine, warming up the world. The snow melted. The river water began to run. Now was the time for the bear to wake up. He stretched one paw and then another. He climbed out of the cave that had been his home all through the winter. What do you suppose he wanted first of all? Something to eat. I'm really hungry, said the big bear. I wonder what there is to eat. Maybe some berries, he said to himself, and he lumbered down to the berry patch. But no berries were on the branches yet. It was too soon for a meal of berries. So the bear went on looking for something to satisfy his big hunger. He walked on down to the river, but there were only twigs and leaves floating on the river. So he went on still looking for anything good to eat. Maybe some grubs, he thought to himself, and he lumbered over and clawed at the ground under the rotten tree stump. But there were no grubs. Now the bear was really hungry and really frustrated. He put his nose between his big paws and began to cry with a loud wail. When he started to stomp around When he started to stomp around in a hungry rage. He stomped so hard it shook the ground. Under the tree stump was a tiny chipmunk who couldn't imagine what was making such a racket. He came scampering out of his home in the ground and saw the big bear. "What's wrong?" he asked. The bear looked down at the chipmunk and said, "I'm really hungry." "Oh," said the chipmunk, "I can help with that. I have all kinds of nuts and berries in my home. Before winter sets in, I store them away so I have plenty to eat in the springtime. I've got plenty." He ran down his hole into the home and came back carrying in his cheeks, some berries that had dried over the winter and some nuts he had gathered from the trees. He dropped the nuts and berries beside the giant paws of the bear and said, "Here, have some. I'm glad to share them with you." Gratefully, the bear began to eat. But he was a big bear, and he was very hungry. The chipmunk was tiny and couldn't carry many nuts and berries at a time, so he had to make lots of trips from his home to the bear until the bear had enough to eat. Well, little chipmunk, you may be a tiny animal, but you have a very big heart, and you have been so kind to me. The bear reached out his giant paw and gently stroked the back of the chipmunk. With the 5 claws on his paw, he left 5 long marks from the front to the back of the chipmunk. Now you have the mark of your kindness, said the bear to the chipmunk. Whenever people see your stripes, they will think of your kindness. So whenever you see a chipmunk, you too can remember that gifts of kindness come from a big heart. It's a cool story. Oh, kindness is important. It does show. It's a sign of strength. Okay, now we are going to read from our Complete Adventures of Curious George. We're on part 2 of George Gets a Medal. And we'll just start right where we left off here. See? The chase was on. George and the cow were ahead at first, but the pump was slowing them down, and the farmers were getting closer and closer. Now they had almost caught up with them, but where was George? Here he was, hiding in a shirt. The farmer had run past him, but on their way home they had to come back over the same road. George did not feel safe in his hiding place. Just then a truck came rattling down the road. George jumped aboard. Monkeys are good at jumping. And he was gone before the farmers had a chance to see him. The truck drove to a part of town that George had never seen before. At last it stopped in front of a large building. It was the museum. George did not know what a museum was. He was curious. While the guard was busy reading his paper, George slipped inside. He walked up the steps and into a room full of all sorts of animals. At first, George was scared, but then he noticed that they did not move. They were not alive. They were stuffed animals put into the museum so that everybody could get a good look at them. In the next room, George saw something so enormous it took his breath away. It was a dinosaur. George was not scared this time. He knew it was not real. He looked at the dinosaur, and then he looked at the dinosaur, and then at the baby dinosaur. And then he saw the palm tree full of nuts. George liked nuts. Suddenly, felt very hungry. He had missed lunch that day. He would climb up, and just then he heard footsteps. He had to hide again, but where? I think Pawpaw needs to slow down just a little bit. He keeps making a lot of mistakes here. We'll roll a little slower. A family came in to take a look at the dinosaur. They paid no attention to the little monkey who was standing there. The monkey did not move. He stood so still, they thought he was just another stuffed animal. George was glad when they were gone. Now he could pick the nuts. He climbed up the dinosaur's neck and started to pull, but the nuts would not come off. George did not know that they were not real. He pulled harder and harder, and the tree began to sway. Crash! Down came the tree on the dinosaur's head, down came the dinosaur, and down came George. Guards were rushing in from all sides, and underneath the fallen dinosaur they found a little monkey. They pulled him out of there and brought him in to Professor Weissman, who was the director of the museum. Professor Weissman was terribly angry. "Lock that naughty monkey up right away," he said, "and take him back to the zoo. He must have run away from there." George was carried off in a cage. He felt so ashamed, he almost wished he were dead. Suddenly the door opened. "George!" somebody shouted. It was his friend, the man with the yellow hat. "It seems you got yourself into a lot of trouble today," he said. "But maybe this letter will get you out of it. It's from Professor Weissman, who needs your help for an experiment. I found it on my desk at home, but I couldn't find you anywhere, so I came over here to talk to the professor." And this is what the letter said. "Dear George, a small spaceship has been built by our experimental station. It is too small for a man, but could carry a little monkey. Would you be willing to go up in it? I have never met you, but I hear that you're a bright little monkey who can do all sorts of things, and that is just what we need. We want you to do something nobody has ever done before. Bail out of a spaceship in flight. When we flash you a signal, you will have to open the door and bail out with the help of emergency rockets. We hope that you are willing and that your friend will permit you to go. Gratefully yours, Professor Weissman, Director of the Science Museum." That one was a little difficult to read because it looks like a letter on the page. "So you are, George," Professor Weissman said. "If I had only known. Of course, everything will be forgiven if you're willing to go." They got the smallest size spacesuit for George and all the other things he needed for the flight. Then they helped him put them on and showed him how to use them. When everything was ready, a truck drove up with special television. When everything was ready, a truck drove up with a special television screen mounted on it to watch the flight. They all got on and were off to the launching site. They checked all the controls of the spaceship, especially the lever that opened the door. George tried it too. The great moment had come. George waved goodbye and went aboard. The door was closed. Professor Weissman began to count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! He pressed the button and the ship rose into the air, slowly at first, and then faster and faster and higher until you could no longer see it in the sky. But on the screen they saw George clearly all the time. Now the moment had come for George to bail out. Professor Weissman flashed the signal. They watched the screen. George did not move. Why didn't he pull the lever? In a few seconds it would be too late. The ship would be lost in outer space with George in it. They waited anxiously. At last George began to move, slowly as if in a daze. He was groping for the lever. Would he reach it in time? There, he had it. He grabbed it. The door opened. Hooray, George was on his way. Out of the blue, an open parachute came floating down to earth. The truck raced over to the spot where George would land. What a welcome for George. Professor Weissman hung a big golden medal around his neck. "Because," he said, "you are the first living being to come back to Earth from a space flight," and on the medal it said, "To George, the first space monkey." Then a newspaperman took his picture and everybody shouted and cheered, even the farmer and his son, and the kind woman from next door, who had worked for hours to get the water out of the room. "I'm proud of you, George," said the man with the yellow hat. "I guess the whole world is proud of you, too." It was the happiest day in George's life. The end. It's the happiest day in George's life. Little space monkey. When we get back in, I don't know how long before we get back to the complete adventures of Curious George, but, oh, here, this last picture. It is called George Takes a Meadow. He's checking himself out in the mirror. Next time we come into the adventures of Curious George, it'll be Curious George Flies a Kite. Let me stick that one back over here real quick, and we're going to finish up this week with Don't Sweat the Small Stuff with Your Family by Dr. Richard Carlson. Chapter 13, page 35. Buy something new, let something go. If you live alone, the strategy is simple. If you have a spouse or a live-in partner, it's considerably more difficult. If you have a family, it's more difficult still. However, regardless of your living situation or how many people live in your home, this strategy is well worth the effort and pays tremendous dividends in terms of more manageable, organized lifestyle. The rationale for this concept is derived from the almost universal tendency to fill our homes to the brim. This seems to be an issue for people regardless of income, the size of their home, geographic location, race, or religion. The problem is that overcrowding can create a great deal of stress and frustration in terms of knowing where to put things and where to find them. Feeling closed in can also have a negative impact on your psyche, making it easier to feel stressed and irritable. The truth is, most people fill up their existing storage space to its absolute capacity. If you have 2 closets in your apartment, each one of them is undoubtedly full. If you have 3, they are probably full as well. Regardless of how much storage space any of us has, we seem to find a way to fill it in. And of course, this would be okay if we never again bought or received a single new item that takes up space. But alas, this is surely not the case. Most of us are constantly taking in new and used items on a consistent basis. The question is, where do we put it all? What most of us do is rearrange our existing stuff. We make room for the new rather than get rid of things. We try to reorganize, cram things together, and pile items on top of one another. We fill up our attics, garage shelves, other storage spaces. A few people even rent storage units outside of locations to create the needed room. We collect things for many reasons: fear of needing them someday, habit, nostalgia. The solution, while requiring a bit of discipline, is quite simple and is virtually 100% effective. Once you recognize that you are operating at full capacity, what you need to do is make a vow that as one new item is brought into the home, something else must go. For example, suppose your 5-year-old daughter receives 2 new teddy bears for her birthday. Using this strategy, you and your daughter would have to decide which of her comparable toys would need to be given away in order to create the necessary space to keep the new bears. Implementing this strategy does several things. First, it keeps the amount of stuff in your home completely under control. You are constantly creating space for new things by removing things that you no longer need or use. A hidden benefit here can be a greatly reduced cost of living. This strategy encourages you to think twice about buying new things because you know you have to get rid of something else. In addition, you're setting an example to your child that it's important that we share our things with other people, perhaps those less fortunate than ourselves, which kind of goes right along with the Giving Box book. We can explain that many children have no toys and that we can give a few of our things away to make their lives brighter. The same principle applies whether we are taking new teddy bears, furniture, Tupperware, or clothing. Obviously, there are plenty of exceptions to this rule. If you don't have enough furniture in your home, it'd be silly to get rid of things that you actually need simply because of an overly rigid commitment to this or some similar plan. If you truly need or want a new pair of jeans, or if your child has only a few toys, you don't need to take this strategy literally. However, in many instances, I think you'll agree that we do have all that we truly need. In these instances, I think you'll find the strategy is one you'll learn to love. You'll enjoy the fact that your home isn't overly cluttered, regardless of how much new stuff comes your way. And you'll enjoy knowing that other people who truly need things are using those things that would have only been taking up space in your closet. This is a simple, highly effective solution to an almost universal problem. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good plan. I don't know if I do a very good job with that. I don't have it in that plan in action right now. I don't know how that would work with the stuff that I have. I have to put some thought on that. Let me see. We're going to do the weekend song real quick. Turn this around. Right. I'll be back when the week is new, and I'll bring more ideas for you. And you'll have things you'll want to do, and I will too. I'll think of you when I'm not here, 'cause thinking of people makes them seem near. Friends who know you love you cheerfully, and I do too. Stop and snatch our card up real quick. Come over here. It says, what would you do for fun if you had to give up electricity? And I wrote on the back, I think I'd read more. More time maybe with my family, playing games or going camping, things of that nature. But I would definitely probably read more than I do. I like to read, and I feel like I don't ever have time. Such a busy, hectic schedule all the time. And I think that's it. Put that in the trash with the card in the back. And remember that I love you guys for being exactly who you're supposed to be, and you're the only one that gets to decide that. And our minds, just like our books, work better when they're open. I'm excited about working on Christmas some more in upcoming weeks. It's that time. Love you guys. See you next week.